Welcome back to episode 3 now, as we start to delve into the ideas of these thinkers and the ideas of Rav Hirsch. And last week we spoke about one of the main drives of his career was the struggle he had with reform in terms of the ideological struggle at the time to sort of show that Judaism could speak to the modern world. And I'm reminded of a beautiful quote from Rav Hirsch. There was an article a few years ago in the JC from one of the leaders of reform in the UK, when she said that out of the ghetto, Jews were presented with two possible responses to the modern world. And her question was, is there not a way to remain committed to authentic Jewish life without turning our back on modern complexities and opportunities? He answered in an article that it was passionate pluralism as practiced by Reform Judaism. But of course, we understand that that's not true. There were not two choices. There was a third choice. There was not the choice of assimilation or ghettoization. There was a third choice, and that was championed by Rav Shimshon, Rafael, Hirsch, who advocated, as we saw last week, observance of halachic Orthodox Judaism while being involved in the wider world. And Hirsch said this in his writings. Now, what is it that we want? Are the only alternatives either to abandon religion or to renounce all progress? We declare before heaven and earth that if our religion demanded that we should renounce what is called civilization and progress, we would obey unquestioningly, because our religion is for us the word of God, for which every other consideration has to give way. There is, however, no such dilemma. Judaism never remained aloof from true civilization and progress. In almost every area, its adherents were fully abreast of contemporary learning and very often excelled their contemporaries. An excellent thing is the study of Torah combined with the ways of the world. Torah im Derech Eretz. There is considerable controversy over Hirsch's legacy. It's actually a matter of debate and discussion amongst three groups: the Haredi world, the modern Orthodox world, and Rav Hirsch's descendants. Everyone agrees that Torah Derech Eretz was his crowning glory, but the exact implementation has been debated. The question is, what is or when does it apply? The Haredi world hold that Hirsch may have approved of secular studies, but only as a horat sha'ah, as a temporary dispensation, because at the time, what was happening with assimilation, with the fight against the reform, it was necessary. But not anymore. Whereas modern Orthodox Jews, those of Yeshiva University and the wider, Mizrahi world, understand Hirsch in sense of Torah Mada, Torah Chochma, a synthesis of Torah knowledge and secular knowledge for its own sake. Therefore, according to Hirsch, you could learn philosophy, music, art, literature, and ethics for its own sake in order to improve and understand Torah in a greater way. And there's a third middle opinion held by Hirsch's descendants, Rav Breuer, that was his successor, Rav Joseph Breuer, and his successor, Rav Shimon Schwab. And they said that in essence, they argue with the Haredi world to say it's not temporary discipline, it's not horat shah. If you read, they said in Hirsch's collected writings, he continually stresses that Torah Derech Eretz is not part of troubled, time-bound notions. Says Hirsch, it represents the ancient traditional wisdom of our sages that has stood the test of time everywhere and at all times. It's not horat shah, so they disagree with the Haredi world. But in response to Torah Madar theory of Yeshiva University, they say that Hirschian philosophy demands the domination of Torah above secular knowledge, not a synthesis. And therefore they say that many adherents of Hirsch's philosophy prefer natural sciences over humanities. And again, it's an interesting discussion of what exactly Hirsch meant by Torah Derech Eretz. But even more fascinating, when you understand it, the world he was living, and I believe very much that's the world we're living in today, that we see that Torah Derech Eretz is needed more than ever before. But what is fascinating about Hirsch's ideology was he may have been somebody who would have been so comfortable in a yeshiva university, in a united synagogue, in that kind of Jewish milieu. He was not a Zionist. In fact, the Zionist movement, which was forming during his time, obviously he died in 1888, and the first Zionist Congress didn't happen till 8 years later. but certainly he was in talking and writing to Rafael Hirsch, one of the leaders of the religious Zionist movement at that time. And in several places in his Bible and Siddur, he says he has a deep love for Eretz Israel. He opposes a movement to wrest political independence for the land of Israel before the Messianic era. In essence, he says that Jewish sovereignty is dependent on divine providence. So again, you have somebody here who literally falls beautifully in line with so many of the ideology of Mizrahi in terms of his understanding of Torah Derech Eretz, but yet would not have been comfortable with the ideology of us returning as human beings to regain the Third Commonwealth in 1948. So again, somebody who I said his ideas in Torah Derech Eretz really drove his worldview, and I think have really influenced massively the way the Jewish world has gone from then onwards. And obviously, Zionistic views may be less so in terms of the Mizrahi world, but certainly his views are held very much in the Haredi world in terms of that. So again, it's a mix, but certainly for me, his main ideal that changed the world was his creation of this ideology, which he says has always been in existence through the Rishonim and the Achronim, to live Torah with the ways of the world. Torah im Derech Eretz. See you next week.